Snacking is one of those things that there's not a lot of agreement on in the carnivore world or in the broader nutrition world in general. And in the carnivore world, we see people eating once a day, maybe twice a day, in some cases, three times in a day, maybe if they're trying to bulk up at the gym or something. But most people gravitate towards once or twice a day. But there's also this rule that people live pretty hard and fast by, which is just eat when you're hungry. So, what happens when you are in that position where you unexpectedly are hungry when you were not, again, it's unexpected. You weren't expecting to get hungry, say, while you're out and about doing errands or you're, on a long drive somewhere. Some will say, just go to McDonald's, get some burger patties. It's always sort of a risk there when you do that, just because the meat quality is questionable. While McDonald's doesn't typically fry these things with seed oils, you still never know. So it's always a kind of iffy. Plus, you might actually be driving in some place where there just isn't a fast food option around. So what do you do? Well, a lot of people will go to gas stations or hit a grocery store and buy, little meat sticks. A lot of grocery stores now are carrying cleaner options, and I'm going to emphasize cleaner because they're not clean. Because regardless of how there may not even be weird binding ingredients in them or anything, the meat is still typically pretty low quality. They're loaded with spices and herbs and things, which people are pretty divided on whether you can have or not. And even then, if you can have the spices that are in them, they may still wreck you. I know this from experience. I found one that was on paper very clean. And on a long drive, I had a couple of them. And then later, I was not in a good place. So I'm talking to you today about snacking. And we're going to talk a little bit about metabolic effects about snacking as well. Because here's the thing. People don't agree on snacking because the research is all up in the air on this. It appears that when you eat, between meals, you do things like, play around with your insulin a little bit. You play around with your satiety signaling. You play around with just broader metabolic effects. It can kind of wreak havoc. But other studies say that some snacking, especially if it's like high protein snacking, is good for you. So what do you do in those situations? My rule would be to keep some snack items on hand, things like these Carnivore Crisps, and I'll show you them here in a minute. You keep those on hand because they're extremely clean for those times where you're going to be on a long drive. You're going to need something. That way you're not going to the gas station and saying, well, the cleanest one of these meat stick things only has dextrose in it. Or you're going to do something worse and go to the hot roller section of like the Quick Trip and hope that the hot dogs there are actually fit for human consumption. Pro tip, they're not. But don't do, point being, there are times where everyone needs something because maybe you're not someone who needs a snack most of the time, but for whatever reason, you get really hungry during the middle of the afternoon one day. Catches you off guard and you need something. So let's talk about this in a little bit here. Again, most meat sticks you're going to buy at the store because that's typically the easiest thing for people. Or gas stations are loaded with various sugars. Not just sugar or cane sugar or corn syrup solids. We know what those are. But you're going to see things like dextrose and maltodextrin and these other corn fillers. Some of these will have fibrous fillers in them. Why? They're binding ingredients. I've watched videos on how these things are made before. Like if you want to make a high quality one from home, but you're not aiming for like a carnivore keto friendly thing. You just want to make a really high quality one. They typically have powdered milk in them. So if you have problems with dairy, a lot of these things will have hidden dairy in them, perhaps under a name that isn't simply powdered milk, but under some chemical name that functionally is just dehydrated milk. You'll get some metabolic effects out of that you weren't looking for. If you're sensitive to dairy, you may have some problems after eating these things. So they can make you sick like they did me. I ate some of these things. I found a really clean one, and the one I'll try to put a picture here. This was the Tillamook brand one. I'm from Oregon originally, and Tillamook products are everywhere. So when I saw these and they said 0 sugar, piqued my interest. And I looked at the label. There wasn't really anything in them wrong. So I bought a bag just because I was curious. That was a mistake. And it wasn't a mistake because I ended up throwing up or anything. It was because my stomach didn't like them later on. took like the next day, but it was an unusual thing that I ate and my stomach hurt, and I figured out pretty quickly that was the thing. But the other problem is they're hyper palatable, meaning they taste really, 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 really good, and so you just want to keep eating them. You don't want a snack like that. You want everything that you eat should have a purpose. It should go into your body. It should give you nourishment. It should give you protein, fat, all the nutrients that are associated with protein and fat. And the more processed the food is, the less good for you it's going to be, the less nutritious it's going to be for you. Remember, here in the carnivore world, keto world, we should be trying to be as clean as possible with our food options. We should try to avoid the processed foods because of their hyperpalatability and also because of just how fake they are. The more they process the food, the more degraded it gets. If it's shelf stable, meaning you can open the package and just leave it out and it's fine, you probably don't want to eat that. It's going to be loaded with all sorts of mystery chemicals in it that have different effects on the body. And we're wondering why in the modern world, modern America, where people are consuming less sugar than they were 20 years ago, they're consuming the same amount of quote unquote calories they were 20 years ago. Obesity is so much worse than it has ever been. Why is that? Because processed foods are on the rise. Plant-based food consumption has been on the rise for 20 years. And most of that stuff is processed. Most people aren't going and buying a brick of tofu, which is minimally processed, and eating that. When they're doing that stuff, they're eating a lot of processed junk. So let's try to keep away from the hyper-processed things. So when I say carnivore crisps, let me take a look at these things. This is just, we're going to be very honest here about these. The ingredients here, I'll put a picture on the screen here, are chicken breast, purified water, and Redmond's real salt. I'm planning a salt video in the future to explain why carnivores love the Redmond's real salt. It's not some weird devotion we have to Redmond's. There's actually a logic behind it. But this package also says something very important. It says refrigerate after opening, because these things are not shelf stable. Once you open the package, the clock starts ticking. They could start going bad. That's a good thing. Trust me. That means this is much more closer to real food. This one here's the chicken breast one. I got to tell you, it reminded me of a potato chip when I ate it. Why did it remind me of a potato chip? Let's take a look. First, this is the chicken breast. Very thin. Watch. That's why it reminded me of a potato chip. It has that satisfying crunch that you can't get anywhere else. A carnivore snack food people really like are pork rinds. I got tired of pork rinds a long time ago. I'd rather not have them than use them to fill a desire for something crispy. These do the job really well. And they're not all the same. Like, I got the beef brisket one here. They're not as crispy. They are somewhere between a chip and jerky. The ingredients on this are grass-fed beef brisket, purified water, Redmond's real salt. Again, clean. That's what you should be looking for in a snack item. Yes, Carnivore Crisps did reach out to me for a sponsorship for a video. I've been planning to do a snack video actually for months. I just haven't gotten around to it. So if you're wanting to try it, there's a link in the description box, and you can get a 10% off at checkout with the code PRACTICAL. And any of the proceeds from this is going to help with a carnivore project that'll be benefit the entire carnivore community. Actually, if I can get it off the ground, I'll have a video on that hopefully in the coming days, because I'll need help on it. It's outside of my financial scope to do it by myself, but there's a huge lack of resources in our community. It's time for us to step up. So I will let you know about that when the time comes. But these are good. I do recommend them. And these help me out in a way where I put I'll have like a little travel pack of them. On Sundays my family and I tend to be on the road a lot. And so I'll have some of these with me. That way I'd rather eat these grass-fed beef with a little bit of Redmond's real salt. I'd rather eat that stuff than a burger patty from a burger joint, especially since some of them use grain as fillers. Anyway, let me know what you thought of this in the comments, please. Let me know what you think of Carnivore Crisps if you had them. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It really does help. Share this on social media. That helps a lot as well. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore. Thanks for your time today.